Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Tech Tinktronics channel, where today we're going to tinker and learn. Today's topic of discussion is comparing spreadsheets using VBA. There are several ways that you can compare spreadsheets. The first easy way to do it is to line them up, separate files side by side. Open the files that you want to compare. In each file, select the sheet that you want to compare. Click the View tab, and in the Windows group, click on the View Side-by-Side option. I'm not a View Side-by-Side person. I feel that if I have to manually do a sheet like that, it's long time tedious, and it's not consistent, and it's prone to errors, I might miss something. So what I've done is I created macros to help me do this sort of task. Now, the first time I went about it, I used just ranges, and that didn't work out too well, but we'll discuss how I use those ranges right now. We'll take a look at this file. And what happens is, this is how my macro works. This first edition of it basically takes a look at sheet 1. Sheet 1 would be the sheet that we're comparing all other sheets to. So what I did was I compared sheets 2 and sheets 3 to sheet 1 in this. And then what happens is it points out the differences. Like, for instance, these are just stocks symbols. And this is some information that I've downloaded from stocks, stock information, stock related information for purchasing stocks and this, that, and the other for the stock market. What happens is it highlights green the differences from spreadsheet 1. As you see, everything is color coded. Color coding it helps make everything easy to view, and you can see the differences. Sheet 1 is the lead sheet that is going to be shown in white. Sheet 2 is the green sheet that will be shown in green, as shown here. And sheet 3 is shown in gray. So basically, anything that differs in the following lines from that first row from the sheet 1 would be considered a difference and would be highlighted as such. And this only took a few minutes to do, and it does it accurately. But the thing is, it's a very picky code. And this is the first rendition of it that I did. And I'll go to developer and I'll say Visual Basic, and we'll take a look at how we did it. We did this code using search ranges. We started to read them. Yeah, this was done using just range. The thing about using range is you're really limited as far as how big of a sheet you're able to do. Like, for instance, if I'm going to run this code, it may take a while. So I'm going to I'll show you how long it takes when I run this code. All right, so what I have to do is I have to delete this sheet, and then I'm going to run the code. And this is, once again, it's doing it solely off of ranges. And we're going to see how long it takes. Okay, the code is running. It's reading everything from each sheet. And it's done heavy entry and heavy data entry and data reading from the sheet itself. So what do we have? Because there wasn't a lot of data, it didn't take too long to run. And the code ran in like 16 seconds. Let's take a look at what we have. We have essentially the same thing. It points out the differences between what's the white line and what's the green line and the gray line. But do you know that this same code could be written in a better way in which you can actually use for larger amounts of data and to get done in the same amount of time? For instance, if I was to use this right now, in a sheet that has 500 rows of records, I would be lucky if I got this thing done in a reasonable amount of time, you see. So the importance is, for large amounts of data, you don't want to use a range. You'd rather use an array. And I'll go forward with that. Let's see, I'll save my work. And I'll demonstrate from 17. Enable content, make it a trusted document, yes. All right, so this is the updated code that takes into consideration what actually works off of an array. It works it's a hybrid kind of code. And this is the code I'm going to go through. Let's see. We'll take a look at Visual Basic. So here's where I declared each sheet. I also declared the variants, which will be the arrays. And I've also declared search range. So I set the sheets here. Sheet 1 is sheet 1. Sheet 2 is sheet 2. Sheet 3 is sheet 3. Then I set the search ranges to include all of the data. And the way I wrote it out was A to G, because we don't know where the data is going to lie or where the data is going to end. And then I use the sheet 1 cells.sheet1.rows count, and I'm using column A. And I want to point out that column A is my identifier column, or what I would say is my lead column. That is the item which identifies the row and determines which row to put into this report based upon where this is found in the other sheets. And I'll explain how that code works a little bit later. Okay, so the search ranges are basically from A to the final column in G. And that's what you would see as noted here. Okay, now I put a timer in the code to determine how long it's taken and that sort of thing. You want to do your application calculation, Excel calculation manual, application screen updating false, application display status bar false, application enablements false. We re-enable these at the end of the code. As seen here. Okay. Now, for me to put this code together was a lot of trial and error. This code essentially, just once again, it allows you to compare as many as two spreadsheets. Well, you're comparing 3 different spreadsheets. Okay, so back to where I was, we did that. All right, the next set of code that I do is we have to add the sheet that we're writing to after all available sheets. So, and then we name that sheet combined. And that's exactly what the code does. And then I declared these var sheet A, B, and C as variants. The purpose of claiming them as variants, declaring them as variants, is they are the array. Now, the same way that I read into range A2G for sheet 1 row count A and column up, row, and all up down that path, I use similar coding to write into the array the range. And then we determine the last row on sheet 1. Last row is very important because when we get to the last row on sheet 1, that's when the code stops. That means that we have looked at everything on sheet 1. There's nothing more past sheet 1 to find. So we move forward. So that's how this code works. I declared some ranges, but I don't think this is necessary. Maybe that's something I could take out, because I already did search ranges up here, so it's kind of redundant. So I ended up not using this part of the code, which may work without if I take it out. Moving forward, we have to determine the last column. On sheet 1, there's the last column. Last column would be G. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The last column number would be 7. I have to count my alphabets. It's just how it is. Okay. Now, I use do-while statements, and this is important. I do this whole thing down here while this row is less than or equal to last row. Very important. All of the code is very important. So I start with the second sheet, which would be var sheet B, and I look through the array. You want to look through the array as much as you can. When I was writing this code, I had to write it several times. I actually wrote this code 3 times. First time was using ranges. Second time was using the array. And then the third time was an enhancement of that concept, incorporating the third page, if you will. So we're going to look for a string. The string that we determine is determined from sheet 1's this row, column A. And as noted before, that would be the lead column by which I use to identify all the rows that contain the data that I'm looking at. And right off the bat, we copy the row to the destination last row 2. I designated the last row 2 as the last row that you would find unused, or the last unused. It would be the last row available on the combined sheet. Now, a lot of this was trial and error. I had to try different codes. I had to piece this together and decide what was going to work and for what my tool and what my needs were. So, moving right along, I used search range, and I use this if in istr find string, and this is what I'm doing actually. Like, forget the with search range because I do some operations with that down there. However, I am searching through the variant or the array for any matching string, and then it takes it to this next step where I had to break things down into count. This is a very special code because this was the first time in my code writing career that I actually had to sit there and think out each line where the code goes, when the code goes, and you'll find that I use the go to feature, which is very handy. Very handy. So what this does is basically it determines how many times my string that I'm looking for is found in the array for sheet B. It also does a thing for sheet 3 or variant var sheet C later in the code. So it determines how many times the so if we were looking for column A1 or column A2, I should say, it looks for all instances of that in the array. And if it's more than one, it's going to go to line 2. And if it's equal to 1, it's going to go to line 1. Line 1 basically does this. It sets the found row to search range 2. And then it uses this workbook sheets, rows found, dot row, entire row copy. It copies the row, and it's just one row to copy. This code is set up to copy, this particular code is set up just to copy one row of data to the sheet. Then it performs the check. It checks the data that it just pasted from the sheet to the column that it just, the row that it just pasted, determines if these row and that column is equal to last row plus count. Count would be 1, so we need to enter a row below. I know it sounds complicated, but I really that's just how it is. But it compares the row we just pasted to the row that we pasted from, and if there's a difference, it says if they're not equal, it's gonna highlight the interior color to green, which is index color 4, which is great. Now, if this was found, if we go back up here, if this find string was found more than once, for all times that it was found, it would take count and it would go to line 2, which is right down here. And what it does, it actually declares a few more variables, and it sets us up to go through the range, search range 2, and it sets us up to copy each instance of row that contains that item that we were looking for. So that if sheet 2 has 2 AABs, we need both AABs in my compare sheet compared with the initial row. So that's what the purpose of splitting up the code is. And then once it finds all the addresses, it one shot pastes both lines into that row, which is really neat. Then it performs the same check that we performed for line 1 for all columns that we pasted, and it loops until count equals 0. Then if count equals 0, it takes it to block 4, and it continues the same process for sheet 3, which I'm not going to get into because it's exactly the same process. I just copied and pasted the same process. Only thing I did different was modified the sheets, the variables, and the locations for where these variables are, such as where everything goes. So that's basically in a nutshell how this code works. It's gonna work off arrays to compare the 3 sheets to compare 2 sheets to sheet 1. And I consider this a hybrid because I'm using a combination of arrays for certain things and rows for certain things. I may be able to write this code better and work it faster if I could use all arrays. But that's another story for another day. Now, when we get to the last, when it does this whole process, when we get to the last line, the important thing is I had to get it to put next row. Next row gets us to the next row. Otherwise, it would just be in an infinite loop, and we don't want that. So when it gets to the next row, line 3, it goes through this process, puts a line under all that we compared for the particular line item, and then it goes on to the next item. So these are stock symbols. I fudged the records to make some change to make this work for my intents and purposes. And then so yeah, it puts a line on the sheet. Then once we get through all rows, all this row, then the code exits sub, or end sub. And that's basically it in a nutshell. When I wrote this, every little change I made, and this is what I encourage you all to do. Like if you're having a problem with the code, you could say, where's the problem I'm having? Say if the problem was right here, you could run the code to that point and then step. Like anything that I had questions about what the code was doing, I would step through it, watch the variables, and determine what was what. And this code is original written by me. If you need to know how to compare more spreadsheets, you need a consultant in that, talk to me and I can tell you what. You can search all over the internet and you'll find bits and pieces, but you won't find the answer. This is like the one-stop shop where you find the answer. So be sure to support the channel and keep us going here by going to all my links down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this program, be sure to subscribe. Be sure to click the like button and share this with a friend. If you have any other things that you would like me to do, you can comment below and you can tell me more in the future. Well, thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen, and you would have a wonderful day.